First of all, I'm honored and humbled to be here. Thank you, D23. Thank you, Michael Vargo. Thank you, everyone. And secondly, I want to give a shout out to Becky Klein and the Walt Disney Archives, because she has a collection of knickknacks in her house that goes back over 150 years. And without archives, thank God that Dave Smith, who started it. Hollywood is a very disposable industry, and we throw things away. But the fact is, we create culture, art, personal importance to everyone in this room, and certainly everyone globally. And instead of throwing it away, Dave Smith figured it's better to remember the past, learn from the past, learn about going forward, doing the right things, and that is the one personally responsible for all of that. So thank you.
Thank you. It's easy to take care of the things that you love, and we go back and say Dave Smith, absolutely, he was the founder of the archives, but he was hired to do so by your great grandfather.
Out of UCLA?
So it's really out of UCLA. He's a librarian there. So grandfather had the vision to start the archives in 1970, and so we're all very grateful for that. Speaking of the Disney family legacy, we're going to talk a little bit here and start at the very beginning. This is the Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio, and it was Roy Oliver Disney who was a crucial part of the founding of the company. And I want to just see, what do you see as his behind-the-scene genius in starting and moving Walt's grand visions along?
So let's go back in time before this shot. By the way, my grandfather's the shorter one there. Thank you, Grandpa. The fact was that Elias Disney, Walt's father, Roy's father, was a loving man, but an extraordinarily tough man. And the reality was that in 1916, 17, 18, all four of the boys, Ray, Irv, Roy, and Walt, basically ran away from home. And, Walt, there they are. And Walt went out on his own. Of course, he had a very unformed but obsessive vision in his head, and he didn't know how to accomplish it. So he went out first in Kansas City, and then partly through the persuasion of Roy, Hollywood, where the action was. But struck out repeatedly. He did things like standing on the side of the set, hoping to be cast as an extra, if you can imagine that. He tried carpentry, he tried loading camera, he tried everything he could do, and failed repeatedly. And then he went, with the help of his uncle Robert, Elias's younger brother, who lived in Hollywood. They just dedicated his house, by the way, to Kingsville. And my cousin Joanne restored it. Set up the garage as an animation studio, essentially, and he created products like the Alice comedies. But then Hollywood is an unscrupulous business, and he lost everything. He lost his artists, he lost the rights to Oswald, for instance, which we finally got back. Anybody have an Oswald picture? But every night he would go to, his brother Roy had done World War I and gotten tuberculosis through the war and was convalescing at that point in the Santa Monica hospital. And he would go to Roy every night. Roy, remember, is 8 years older than Walt. And would tell Roy the story of, how he'd lost. And his brother was a no-nonsense banker from Kansas City. And I mean no nonsense. And the reality was that Roy finally checked himself out of the hospital against his brother's advice, or his doctor's advice. And the two of them went into business as the Disney Brothers. And that was in 1923, I think. Anybody?
You know what? Our theme this year is around the world. And Roy O, after company with Walt, he took a lot of really interesting business moves and went all over the world and built an empire of Disney consumer products and publishing and all kinds of amazing things, as well as running the finances and the business of the studio. Can you tell us a little bit about, some of the highlights of his career?
So, if you know, half the company is built on foreign business. And in those days, it was marketing the product that we were producing. And remember, we're the first to do character marketing, so we also marketed that. But he would go to Europe every other year and meet the distributors in every country. He knew their families, he knew their kids' birthdays, and every other year he would fly them to his house, which is the house that I live in, and entertain the families. That's what I grew up with as a kid. And so he built the company until World War II on that. And then, of course, in World War II, it all went away, so he had to start all over again. But just to give you an idea of one of the famous trips he did, in 1946, he flew to London to meet E.L. Travers. In London. To start negotiating Mary Poppins. Which is crazy to think that it was in production in 1964 and we still didn't have a contract. But
He was a brave man.
I'm just saying, I'm not saying that he was a good negotiator. But yeah, he traveled the world, and my dad, who had access to cameras at 3 years old, photographed a great deal of it. So I'm lucky to have some of these photos.
You're great. Now let's get to you. And you can tell me, what's some of your earliest Disney memories?
Okay, well, first of all, that's not me.
Oh, darn.
And secondly, I will tell you that my dad had access to every toy we ever made and broke them all. So he and I have never quite worked out. But
that's your grandfather holding the hand of your father.
Yeah, I think that's Lyric Avenue, if I'm correct.
Yes.
And it's really remarkable that we have all this stuff. I still have some of the stuff, but not a whole lot.
Well, your father grew up and took you and your siblings to Disneyland, and you have your brother and 2 sisters, correct?
Correct. We're all a year apart. They used to call that Irish twins, or
Irish twins.
The Catholic method. I don't know if I can say that. I don't know how much my mother had to say about that. But anyway, this photo of my dad and my younger sister and younger brother is probably one of my favorite Disney moments of all time, just because it is the classical family Disney moment. That was my mother in the Dumbo, my grandmother in the Dumbo ride. She was fearless. She was the first person to sit on Space Mountain at 80 years old. She was the first person to sit on the People Mover rocket cross ride, if you remember that. There's my grandmother on the left-hand side of the bench. The Matterhorn at Disneyland, they don't do that anymore. And this is my aunt, who was a tour guide. And that's the outfit they made them wear. If anybody's seen these.
Here's another great shot of you with your grandparents.
Yes, and oh, by the way, this is how I had to dress. Because we had to represent. And I have a great story about that. When we were kids, back in the day, my parents let us just free range apart. And they said, I want you back at City Hall at 12:30. And if you can't make it to City Hall, ask a security guard, and they will help you. So I did one day, just to find out how that worked. I'm not saying I didn't know how to get to City Hall, but I am saying I thought it was cool to talk to a security guard. And the first thing he said to me is, "What's your name?" And I, of course, said Disney. And he, of course, said, "Oh, yeah."
And then you said Roy Disney, and that made it even worse, huh?
Yeah, okay.
So, speaking of Disneyland, a question. Did you ever spend time with Walt at Disneyland, who was your great uncle?
So, I spent more time in Walt's outer office when we would go visit my grandfather, but my grandfather was an accountant, essentially. So, boring outer office. But Walt had the outer office that wouldn't quit. It had every Academy Award in it, and all new toys in it, and we would sit out in that outer office for hours. But Walt Walt was a workaholic. I mean, he slept 2 hours a night. He never stopped, never stopped. But I do have one special moment that I can remember so clearly. When I was probably about 7 years old, we used to have a ride at the park. And that's not a ride, it's a show. A guy on a jetpack. It was sponsored by Bell Helicopter. Bell, it wasn't even a helicopter in those days.
Sorry. Let's turn that sound down if you don't mind. Go ahead and speak over this.
Yeah, so this was the loudest, smokiest ride we ever did. As you can see.
That's cool.
But Walt picked me out of a crowd that day, and he had 2 chairs set up on top of this little 1-story control tower that they had around that little circle. And he put the chairs up there, and he and I sat up there and watched this event. And I, king of the world, I felt like the most important person on earth, and he had a way of doing that to every single child I ever ran into at that park. God bless him.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's really so exciting.
See, even those people were applauding.
Well, now here we have another wonderful, momentous event at the park that you got to witness, and that was the opening of Magic Kingdom in Walt Disney World in 1971. You were there.
October 23rd, 1971.
Look at Pluto.
Wow. That's great. Because I'm only 39, so. Yeah, you know, swampland in Florida, and I grew up in my childhood. We drove from California to Key West, and one of my dad's jobs was to reconnoiter the state of Florida in 1966, 67, just to see what the entertainment industry in the state looked like. And it was alligator farms, bush gardens, cypress gardens, and that was it. And some cats at the Hemingway house. But in any event, when we drove up to this park in the week before it opened, every tree that you see on the property was still in a box. They had not even planted the trees. The rooms of the Contemporary were still being plugged in by cranes. And you ask, why didn't we get it perfect before we opened it? And I thought to myself, the thing kind of had a momentum. And it kind of had to open. So, and that said, if you see the picture of my grandfather, who never gave a public speech, speaking, standing next to Mickey and Lily and my grandmother, they had, Meredith Wilson conducted a 1,076-piece marching band that came, we were standing on the top of the train station. They came out from underneath us, they went around the Main Street Circle, and they went up, I think 6th wide, and they went up Main Street and up to the castle, and at that point they were still coming out from underneath the train station. It's one of the most profound moments in my life.
There's nothing better than a big marching band. That's wonderful. Now, I want to move on a little bit now and start talking a little bit about your father, who's Roy Edward Disney. Roy was also there, of course, at the opening of Walt Disney World, and you got to spend some time with him there, didn't you? Do you have any fun memories of that?
Yeah, we were there probably anywhere between 6 and 8 times a year for the first couple of years. And it was a playland for sure. If you see there are home cats, which are catamarans, and then of course I got to sail these around too when they rented sailboats back in the day, but they've stopped that probably because of me. In any event, my father and I used to get the Hobie Cat up on one hull, and we would sail by the ferry boats going to the park. And those drivers hated us.
But they couldn't say a word, could they?
I can't say one way or the other, but they're
Well, there are some other sailboats, though, in your family history. I've got a shot here, a very special one.
Yeah, this is a movie that my father and I did called Morning Light, which is still on iTunes, I think. Youngest crew ever to sail to Hawaii. He trained them for 2 years. 2 of these kids, I still call them kids, they're not anymore. Eventually competed in the round the world race and won it the last time. Charlie Enright and Mark Powell. And this was a project that I was a personal trainer on, as well as a sail master for these kids for 2 years. Terrible, sucky job, but I did it.
Well, there's also another famous boat in your family history, and I found something recently that I thought was really hilarious. Have you been to the yacht club, stayed at the yacht club at Walt Disney World? Well, they used to have these wonderful shower curtains in the rooms.
Wait, that's my shower curtain.
Exactly. If you look at it really closely there, you'll see a ship that has the name Pyewacket on it. And Pyewacket was Roy's other boat. You want to tell us a little bit about Pyewacket?
So Pyewacket is a boat that my dad and I have been sailing together since 87. And before that, the boats were all called Shamrock. For my mother, I imagine. But her maiden name was Katie, so quite Irish. But in any event, so there have been a lot of Pyewackets. Pyewacket, the name itself, is, well, frankly, it's a crossword puzzle word, but it means magical cat. Or in Druid, it means male witch. And it's a cute name. It's not an evil name, but for those of you into Villain's Land, I don't know. Could be there.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about your father's huge impact on the history of Walt Disney Company. He was integral. He traveled a lot, just like his father Roy did. And let's go back a little bit further and tell us a little bit more about Roy and family. And I love this picture there of Lillian with
That's
his parents.
Lily, and this is the press opening night, June 17th, 1955, where my mother is showing off her massive, giant quarter-carat diamond ring. And that's Lily at the Golden Horseshoe Review congratulating both of them for getting engaged. I wasn't born for 2 years after that, so I had questions. But anyway, this is the wedding day, and there's Walt, or there's my grandfather and Edna, and my grandmother and grandfather on my mother's side. The happy, young, naive couple.
Well, then after that, they ended up getting married and they went to Switzerland.
They went to Geneva. Walt had just done, Roy had just done a TV show called Perry for Disney Sunday Movie. Perry was about squirrels. You know how squirrels talk. It's weird that animals talk, right? And so Walt had tasked my father with writing the book to go to the TV show. And my dad proceeded to get pneumonia. So, but they spent quite a bit of time, I think, almost a year in Geneva.
Well, this is really funny. We are going to be doing a show shortly about Down the Rabbit Hole, which is about all the things we find in the archives where we're not really looking for them. And just the other day, I wasn't even prepping for this presentation, but I came across something when I was looking for something entirely different. And it was in the Mickey Mouse Club magazine, which came out in 1956. And there's a story in there about Switzerland written by Pat and Roy E. Disney. I had never shown that to you, did I? Isn't that fun?
I need to read this.
They told the whole story and all the photos of the article were shot on their honeymoon. So I thought that was adorable.
Remember I told you my dad had cameras, so he shot all those photos in there.
Now here's a lovely picture. You're still dressing up for all of your adventures.
Does anybody remember flying like this? This is how we used to have to fly all the time, not anymore. People do their nails, people do all sorts of things. That's Pan Am Airways in the background at LAX. I think we were on our way to Washington, D.C. Walt got the Medal of Arts Award from Richard Nixon. And so we were traveling to D.C., my mother in her Chanel outfit.
Great. And what's the other photo?
The other one, my dad was a pilot when he was 16 years old, which is quite an accomplishment. And one of his flight instructors was one of the 9 old men named Wooly Ryder, you might remember.
You directed the Jungle Book. So let's move on now to your father is so famous for his contribution to saving animation at Disney. And we've been celebrating so many of the films that came out during his time overseeing the animation division. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so can anybody keep a secret in this room? Anyone? Because I see all the cameras up. So when we ended up replacing management in 1984, the first item on the business plan was to eliminate animation. And we had just made 2 films, The Black Cauldron and The Black Hole. Now, if that's a direction that we were going, and my dad said, no, time out. You let me take care of animation. And so my father was personally, directly responsible for the renaissance of Disney animation. Correct. I worked first at the Disney Channel, film and television post-productions, and then for a while as an Imagineer.
And in that time, you worked with your dad on one really great project, right?
Yes. So in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a thing called Japan Inc., and we all thought Japan was, they were buying everything, and their economy was booming. But it occurred to me that 98% of everything they have, they import, and they have nowhere to put it. And it occurred to me that if we could somehow be sustainable and manage our environment and still make a profit, we would have a product that we could sell to them. So that was the genesis of the idea. So I went to my dad and I said, what if we had an environmental policy? And he said, okay, I like the idea, but if you could sell this to Frank Wells, who was the CEO of the company, or the COO, then we'll talk about it. And Frank was a Harvard-educated lawyer who climbed 6 of the 7 summits and one of the smartest, most intimidating men I've ever met. Super guy. Basically, it was 3 hours of me saying, why not? And he would say, why?
Well,
but it's a standoff, and we have environmentality today, and I help write that.
Yay! Woo!
Well, we only have about a minute left, and so I wanted to just ask you one final question. This is a lovely montage here of all 3 of the Roy Disneys that have worked at Disney. And just want to see, what is your, what philosophy would you take?
Well, first of all, that's a trick question.
Oh, there's one. Well,
There's actually more than 3 Roys. I have a son named Roy Michael, but I think we're done with the Roys. We had a dog named Roy. Dinner was very It's a very old school name. It's mine. It's easy to spell. So the question was, what philosophies did I learn growing up that I think can still apply today or valuable today that the company should keep in mind? And let me say that, first of all, I believe those philosophies are deeply imbued in the company now already. But that said, it starts with telling a quality story. That's the most important, endearing thing we have, because those things endure. Snow White is a ride that we still stand in line for, and that's 1932. What are the odds? So telling the strong story, having the strong connection, musically, God bless Jody Benson, for instance, God bless Howard Ashman, and all the Broadway writers and singers that you just saw in the villains. Those are amazing people.
Absolutely.
But stay with quality, do the right thing.
Yeah!
Simple philosophies that are great to follow. We have one little thing that I wanted to leave you with. This is a really sweet little edited piece that we want to share that features your grandfather, Roy O. Disney, and the founding of the Walt Disney Company and founding of Walt Disney World. So we're going to leave you with that, but before we go, big round of applause and thanks for
Yay! Woo!
Is a tribute to the philosophy Disney. And to the talent, the dedication, and the loyalty of the entire Disney organization that made Walt Disney's dream come true. May Walt Disney World bring joy and inspiration and new knowledge to all who come to this happy place. A magic kingdom where the young at heart for all ages can laugh, play, and learn together. Dedicated this 25th day of October 1971.
Because y'all have been buying them so fast. So definitely there's so much more to collect. And they can go to your booth.
Yes, and please come by and say hi. It's been so wonderful to chat with so many of you and to hear about where your love has been going and what you like. And we are a brand that listens to certain sizes or styles or anything, characters that you want to see, and let us know. So we always love that feedback.
And we're a family brand. We live here in Orlando with two amazing kids, and we are just like everybody. We stand in the lines here at the parks. We build bags with purpose because we know what it's like to stand in the line, need your water bottle, need your card, everything.
And sanitize with purpose.
These are Disney bags designed by Disney fans. And I said it 2 years ago, but when you buy a lunch bag, you're buying their dream come true. And it's also not just your dream, but it's your entire team. The entire Love team is made up of Disney fans, and I love seeing dreams come true and just Disney magic, and you are pure Disney magic. So
I want to give a shout out to our love team. You are the best. I guys, it takes a village to put off what we did with the food and everything. So shout out to Team Love. Thank you so much.
And let's hear it one more time for the founders of Love, Amy and Jason Richter. All right, thank you everyone. See you real soon.
Yeah. See? Look at the back. Yeah. Woo!
The animation team really wanted to honor the original film, so they dove deep into Donald's heritage, drawing inspiration from classic comics and even the original Duck family tree. That includes bringing Donald's great-grandfather, Clinton Crute, the founder of the Junior Woodchucks, to life in animation for the very first time. And you can catch all of that feather-filled fun on Disney Plus. It's definitely worth the watch. And we actually have some early production art in the Walt Disney Archives collection, too. And bringing it back to where we are right now, Disney's Coronado Springs Resort, there's a vibrant energy throughout, especially in the guest rooms, where you can see framed artwork of the three Caballeros with their silhouettes. And if you get the chance, just off the rotunda, you'll see Panchitos, of course. The shop features vibrant Mexican tower, and right in the spotlight, a gold statue of Panchito the rooster, looking like he's ready to burst into song any moment. But let's take a trip back in time to if we have any Disneyland fans out there. We have Fantasy on Parade. So this was a holiday parade that ran from 1965 to 1976, and then again from 1980 to 1985. And yes, it featured the three Caballeros proudly perched on a giant trunk, much like the ones you see in the film. It was a beloved holiday tradition at Disneyland with over 350 performers bringing the magic to life. And eventually it was replaced by Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Parade, but it still holds a special place in Disney history. But you can still catch the three Caballeros in the parks during the Disney Festival holidays at Disneyland. They host a lively Disney Viva Navidad street party featuring high-energy performances by mariachis, Brazilian samba dancers, and towering tall puppets, all celebrating Latin American holiday traditions with music, color, and flair. And of course, if you're visiting the Epcot International Flower and Garden Festival, keep an eye out. You might spot the Caballeros brought to life in vibrant floral form. And don't forget, the three Caballeros make a cheerful appearance in the sunny Mexico section of It's a Small World at Disneyland, where they add their own catchy tune to the celebration. Of course, one of their most lively performances takes place on the classic Epcot attraction, Grand Fiesta. So this attraction originally debuted as El Rio del Tiempo, one of the opening day features at Epcot. Now, don't worry, you'll be hearing much more about this version in the next presentation. So we're gonna fast forward to 2007, when the ride was refreshed and reimagined as the Grand Fiesta Tour starring the three Caballeros, bringing Donald, Jose, and Panchito into the spotlight for a fun-filled adventure through Mexico.
Bring our animated birds of a feather to life, and the attraction was all thanks to the talented artists at Walt Disney Animation Studios and Walt Disney Imagineering. We've got an amazing clip from animator Eric Berger at last year's D23, the Ultimate Disney Fan event, who shares how Donald, Jose, and Panchito were added to the updated version of the attraction. Let's check it out.
What you're going to see is kind of a slap of several of the scenes. It's not, you'll see that some of the characters don't match their registration marks and things like that. Now, sometimes we were tasked to do different gags for the same screen.
So special. Originally, the finale was fully animated using traditional hand-drawn techniques, but in 2015, character animation was replaced with audio animatronics figures, adding a whole new dimension to the experience.
And who better tell us more about that than someone who actually brought that attraction to life? So please welcome Executive Creative Director at Walt Disney Imagineering, Jason Grant!
You guys did great. I was next time I'll try harder. I did my best. But curious to hear more about some of the history of these figures that we brought into the attraction.
Absolutely. Yes, Jason. So, in fact, before Walt Disney World even opened, the three Happy Trappies were already spreading cheer at a 1969 press event in Ocoee, Florida, where hundreds of state officials, press members, and industry representatives gathered to preview what was being called the Vacation Kingdom of the World.
And this was great because these figures were actually brought on one from Wet Enterprises. It was really fascinating because of all the figures they could pick. They picked these, they came to the event, and then they got shipped back to California so they could be part of the programming for the show.
So, Jason, what was that show like?
So Mickey Mouse Review was really interesting because it was almost like a golden book come to life on stage. There was this really beautiful storybook vignettes. You can see some of them up here. I went on this attraction as a kid. I only know that because we have photos in our photo album. But it wasn't until 2003 when I went to Tokyo Disneyland where I got to see it for real. It was one of two things that was on my must-do list. And it was great. If you can go online, you should take a look for it, especially the pre-show, which was really exciting. But to see these guys and see the three cabs come to life on stage was really fun. It was a great show.
Yeah, actually, at Tokyo Disney, it had a really successful run at Walt Disney World, and it packed up the Mickey Mouse Review to go over to Tokyo Disneyland as an opening day attraction on April 15th, 1983, marking the Caballeros' grand debut in Tokyo. There, the concert continued to charm guests until its final curtain call, which was in 2009.
But the magic goes on thanks to the Walt Disney Archives, which holds a special piece of the attraction's history. Maestro Mickey himself, he's been carefully preserved the archives, still standing proudly upon his podium.
And that takes us up to the present. We know those audio-electronic figures have flown the coop into the attraction, if you will. Could you elaborate a little more on that, Jason?
Yeah, it was great. When we started Grand Fiesta Tour, for me it was really rewarding because I loved El Rio. I would go ride it at lunch all the time because my office was right behind Horizons, which became Mission Space. And then around this time, we started getting rumors that three cabs were coming into the boat ride, and I kind of tried my best to be a part of that team, and I got to do it. But it wasn't until much later when the show closed in Tokyo, a couple of very eagle-eyed Imagineers in Florida worked to get those figures here, which was great. And then our engineering services partners, the people who take care of the parks, actually for many years used them as a training exercise and got them back up to speed and got them up and running. And once they were ready to go, we then moved around and started to get them back into the attraction. The next image you're going to see is actually really fun. This is a Bill Justice drawing. Bill Justice designed most of the character vignettes for Mickey Mouse Review. And what's really interesting here is he's showing some of the character moves that Jose and Don will have to do. And because the music was so up-tempo, Bill kind of said to everybody, hey, these guys can't move on a beat. Oh, I'm not a music person, I just recommend it. Maybe we need to rethink how this is going to work. But you'll see in the next clip, they did. They pulled it off. And this is archival footage. This is after the figures are fully rehabbed. We ran them through the original show from Mickey Mouse Review. Here you can see Jose kind of moving and tapping his foot.
That's really cool.
You look at his strumming hand, how fast it's going. And he's so cute. And then once we got them back into this stage, then we started to reprogram them for the new show. You'll see here they have hard shells. We feathered them up because we knew guests would get closer to them on the attraction, which was great. And if you flip to the next slide, you'll see them in their final spot right now as they are in the attractions there. It was really fun. I know a lot of you folks out there are like super eagle-eyed people. We were so nervous people didn't know that we were doing this because the 3 nights before we were in there prepping the stage for them, oh my God, someone's going to see them. Then on that third night was probably the longest time I ever spent in an El Rio boat. A bunch of us just sat there and floated. We got the figures in place and ran the show. And then that morning they opened the attraction and there they were. And it was really, really fun to kind of have them kind of come back home to Walt Disney World after kind of this whirlwind tour to Tokyo.
And don't forget to check out our exclusive exhibit, Charting the Course, Disney's global stories and inspiration, only here at Destination D23. Now, on to our next event. Thought you knew